I just thought of an additional component. I analyze current events, and that is we pretty much all define ourselves significantly against. So I was trying to think about Trump's Gaza plan. I needed to listen to and read a bunch of other perspectives on any major event that I'm going to comment on. I want to read different perspectives because I find out how I think by defining myself against. And I've lived much of my life through a conscious and unconscious desire to define myself apart from my father, right? To get out from under my father's shadow and to not be as unhappy as my father. So I did not want to follow my father's trajectory. I did not want to repeat his mistakes. And so I embraced therapy, right? My father never embraced psychotherapy. I embraced Alexander technique. My father never embraced anything like Alexander technique. I embraced yoga and Judaism and all sorts of things that my father would never embrace because I wanted to become a different person from my father. And so when I'm listening to pundits and experts and they use cheap put downs with regard to their opponents, right, I define myself against that. Right? When I listen to the awkward, constipated, frequently bizarre way that Peter Thiel, Curtis Yarvin speak, or Jordan Peterson, or Brett Weinstein, Eric Weinstein, I define myself against them. When I listen to the glib assertions of Dennis Prager and the pseudo-profundity racket that he and so many other gurus are operating, right, I deliberately define myself against that racket. So when I encounter people who are optimizing for audience, who are optimizing for attention, who are optimizing for political activism, right? Mike Benz is a highly effective political activist, and I share virtually all of his worldview, but I notice he optimizes for political activism. He's not optimizing for truth. And when you listen to Mike Benz, right, you're getting an activist spin, and he's quite willing to speak out very forcefully on all sorts of things that he doesn't know much about. Same with Steve Bannon, right? He's primarily an activist. And I'm willing to put up with Steve Bannon, right? Now, there are times that I just get sick of Bannon. It's like, no more. So his anti-COVID, casting down anti-COVID restrictions, casting doubt on the vaccines, casting doubt on the efficacy of the 2020 election results, right? I had no time for Steve Bannon there, but other situations I find Steve Bannon useful. But I recognize that he's quite willing to do anything to promote a particular agenda, and that he often employs references and stances that make him feel heroic, but are far removed from reality. So with Decoding the Gurus, they're doing something on Peter Thiel right now, and it's excellent. I mean, Peter Thiel invoking Christian teachings regarding the end of time to analyze the world around us, that's pretty dodgy. And only in an insular world where you're venerated and you're the billionaire and you've got lots of followers because you're a billionaire and an important funder of various causes, right, would you be free from derision? Right, taken just on his own, many of the things Peter Thiel says would rightly be derided. He has this incredibly awkward way of speaking that makes him highly unpleasant to listen to. And I recognize that at times he has published things that are important. But overall, there's just way too much awkwardness. And I just have a physiological reaction to people like Peter Thiel and Curtis Yarvin. And it's my body warning me, this is not time well spent. So my father embraced golf. Excellent, right? The more things that you can get passionate about, this is where I agree with Prager. The The more things you're excited about, the more things you're passionate about, the more things you're devoted to, the more allegiances you have, the more opportunities that you have to bond with other people, the more communities that you're a part of, the more reasons you have to get up in the morning, the more reasons you have to look forward to the day ahead, right? Whether it's golf or the Los Angeles Lakers or your religion or your watercolors or your live streaming, right? The more things you're excited about, right, the better, because it takes so much energy to move your way through life and get anything done. Aside from just what's required at work, right? Energy comes from passion and enthusiasm and devotion. So, back to the topic, I developed my worldview in large part in opposition to people who are clearly not optimizing for truth for the sake of power, such as Mike Benn, Steve Bannon, and other political activists. I define my views in opposition to people who are afraid to say what is true, because it will cost them prestige and comfort in their academic positions or their media positions. I notice people who aren't going to stray because they're primarily careerists, right? Their career is the most important thing to them, and they're not going to say or do anything that's going to damage their career until finally I notice sometimes they just snap, right? I've noticed quite a few careerists just snap under the weight of the Great Awakening. Some of them have left the country. Others have been willing to give up soft, comfortable, high-status positions because they just can't stand the BS anymore, right? They see through the BS. Lib Medley is throwing down the Pac-Man. Interesting choice there, Glib. So, I define myself against other people in the distant right who automatically dismiss the mainstream media. So, I want to produce something different, so I have to define myself against to create my own niche. So, I am different from people in the distant right in that I don't have a knee-jerk dismissal of the mainstream media or of academia or of expertise. I differ from populists in that I don't necessarily think that populism is more likely to be right than elitism or aristocracy. Right? I differ from the elites in that I don't believe the elites are more likely to be right than the people. Right? I am midway between the populists and the elites. Right now, in this political moment, I overwhelmingly support the populism of Donald Trump, and I hold my nose at his disastrous elections for Department of Health Care and Human Services, Bobby Kennedy, and FDA, etc. I think his choices are terrible, but I so love the whole package that I'm not banging on about those parts of his populist revolution that I think are ill-judged. So overall, I'm highly impressed with what Donald Trump is doing, and I'm not going to diminish my enthusiasm to try to seem more cool, more calm, more collected. Right? I am enthusiastic about this new Trump regime for all its flaws. And I love his ideas about transforming Gaza, even while at the same time I'm both giddy and I see very strong arguments against them. So I want to optimize for truth within the limitations of my own well-being. Right? There are going to be stories and topics that I can't go all the way. But I'm not primarily a right-wing activist. I differ from the mainstream media and mainstream expertise, and I recognize different people have different gifts. I differ from most people in that I'm an Orthodox Jew and I lead a highly regulated life, regulated by Jewish law. But I will differ from many religious people in that I recognize that for many people religion does not make them better, that some people seem to get better as they leave religion. Even though I appreciate religion, I like religion, I respect religion. I have an inclination that most people are better off with some degree of religion operating in their life. I do recognize that right now in the United States there's no correlation between religiosity and decency, religiosity and ethical behavior. Certain times and places, I do think there is a correlation between religiosity and decency. So I keep defining myself against. I define myself against religious zealots or political activists who say, religion's the answer to the meaning crisis. Religion is the answer to the meaning crisis for some people. For a lot of other people, right, their meaning crisis is better addressed elsewhere. Primarily the meaning crisis, if you have a meaning crisis, it means you don't have friends and family, right? You don't have a normal relationship with yourself, let alone other people. And so you get lost in an abstract world to try to find some basis for living. So meaning crisis means you're really messed up, you're really neurotic. So I think psychology, biology, sociology are really powerful tools, but they don't explain everything. Right? I don't look to religious experts for wisdom about geological changes or biology. So, yes, I define myself against. I don't know what I stand for until often I hear competing perspectives. And I don't think I'm unusual in defining myself against. Right? Jews have lived in the diaspora. A majority of Jews lived in the diaspora since about the 5th century BC. Until recently, majority of Jews lived in the diaspora, and they kept their distinct Jewish identity alive by continually contrasting superior Jewish ways of doing things with inferior non-Jewish ways of doing things. Right? If you're a minority and you don't think that the skills and the gifts and the habits, the practices, the outlooks, the community, the cohesion, the joy, the energy that you develop within your in-group is superior to that which is available outside of your in-group, right? You're not going to have that minority identity at a very intense level. You're going to assimilate. And assimilation is not necessarily good or bad, but the way that people hold on to a strong identity is by defining themselves against the majority. So for Jews and Muslims in America, much of their identity is we're not Christian. Just like I would assume for Jews in Egypt, Coptic Christians in Egypt, I would assume that much of their identity is we're not Muslim. So I listen to the mainstream media and the pronouncements of experts and the polite discourse, and I think it's stilted, I think it's constipated, I think it's overly sanitized. I think it overly emphasizes harm reduction at the expense of other worthy ends. I listen to distant right discourse, and I think it's become lost in a sense of victimization and in knee-jerk dismissal of contrary points of view, particularly knee-jerk dismissal of academia, expertise, and the mainstream media. I listen to zealots and I find, they're not optimizing for truth here. Or I listen to people with strong in-group identities and I notice how their ties to their group are blinding them to different perspectives. And so I think much of right-wing discourse on talk radio and on Fox News is moronic. So I define myself against that. I think that the left and academia and the mainstream media are obviously blind with regard to the significance of group differences. I define myself against that. So I think we all substantially develop our own definition against our parents, against siblings, against community, against friends. We have certain experiences, and it's like, no way do I ever want to go down that line again. So I was beaten a lot as a kid, and as a result, I became really adept at lying. And then I developed a lifelong habit of when I got into trouble, I just try to lie my way out of it. And it's a very hard habit to break. So now when I'm caught out on something, I try to stay away from explanations because I have such a strong incentive to lie. Instead, I just say, I'm sorry. Just try to limit it. Because if I keep talking, right, I'm going to start lying. So I know that there are certain situations that are dangerous for me. I'll talk to you blokes later. Bye-bye.